Hello, and welcome to Red Dragon Gaming. Today, we're showing off Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing. Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing is made by WizKids games, in spite of the fact that Hasbro, a completely different toy company, owns Wizards of the Coast, that of course makes the Dungeons & Dragons game. They decided this is not the type of thing they want to do, apparently, so they license it to WizKids. WizKids makes this game. On top of that, the actual gameplay in this game is based upon a completely different game called X-Wing, which is made by Fantasy Flight Games up in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota here. And X-Wing pioneered the gameplay style this uses, which we'll talk about in a bit, and WizKids also has to license it from them. So why am I not talking about X-Wing? Well, X-Wing's a great game, but I love Dungeons & Dragons, and the Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing game has a few unique features that X-Wing does not. So we're going to talk about D&D today. The basic premise of this game is there are two players. On this side, we have some elves and their allies, and over here we have a dragon. Each player would control one of these forces, and they would be fighting each other. In the Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing game, while you do not have to do this, one of the things this game does is with every single miniature, because all of these minis are bought separately, or at least in separate groups, so like these elves were all bought together, the ballista over there was bought separately, the dragon was bought separately from that. Within each of these groups comes a small little pamphlet, and in that pamphlet is an adventure. The adventure lays out how the miniature that you purchased, so if you purchased the green dragon, how the green dragon miniature is involved in a combat. It has a goal that everybody's trying to do. They come with these little terrain pieces you can see on the table here. The terrain pieces play into that adventure. Each miniature comes with a unique terrain piece that plays into the adventure. So you set it up, and if that's the adventure you want to play, the one that came with the green dragon, you set it up, and your one side is fighting the green dragon for whatever reason is listed in the adventure. You can actually link these adventures together, and the winner of this adventure will get a prize to carry over into the next adventure. A friend of mine and I did that for a while before we both couldn't afford to buy miniatures anymore. So these are actually the first generation of miniatures. So the way this game is played is you get the two teams, they're fighting each other in that adventure. You don't have to use the adventure if you want. You can, in fact, just set up the table and have a skirmish. You know, there's a green dragon and some elves and their allies, and hey, the elves and their allies are wandering around and they saw a green dragon and said, hey, let's go fight a green dragon for whatever reason. Maybe the dragon's been terrorizing a village. I don't know what the scenario is. I just know that you can do whatever you want. So in order to play the game, you take, and everybody will take their little dials. There's a little dial, and they will set it to the movement they want to do. And that movement will then affect the way everybody moves around the board. So every single miniature on the board gets a movement dial. You set it for your guys, your opponent sets it for his guys, everybody puts them face down. Then you reveal them in the initiative order. Initiative is determined by the cards that come with the miniatures. So you reveal your dials and move your miniatures according to the initiative. You move by taking these sticks over here, and you place them in front of the miniature. You'll choose the appropriate stick as depicted on your dial. So if you have a 1 straight ahead, you take the 1 straight stick, put it directly in front of your miniature, move your miniature so that the stick is touching the front of it, so that your miniature is on the other side of the stick, and your miniature is touching the back of it. And now you've moved. Everybody moves, and then you go through and attack. So once everybody's in position, the dragon may breathe fire on everybody in front of him. Your elves might shoot their crossbows. Whatever's going to happen. One of the unique things about this game is X-Wing, of course, the original game takes place in space. This takes place on a planet. So dragons can fly, elven archers cannot. They have to stay on the ground. The dragon can land if it wants. It has different movement modes depending on if it's flying or it's landing. There are magic spells that can give wizards the power of flight that you can use, and they get special movement abilities then. Things can hover, so they don't necessarily have to move each turn, but not everything that can fly can also hover, so some things have to move, which could get you in trouble. You could run into other minis, you could fly off the table. Fun things like that. When you get to attacks, everybody rolls an attack die, which are these red dice. They each have a special symbols on them. Some of them are hits, some of them are critical hits, some of them are special abilities you can activate. And then the opponent will roll a certain number of defense dice. The attack dice and defense dice are both indicated on the stat cards for your miniatures, and they are can be modified by other cards. We're not going to get too into that. But you roll your attack dice, your defense dice. The defense dice have evasion. They also have special abilities that can be activated. Both sets of dice also have blank sides, which means, hey, nothing cool happened. So you got a little element of chance in there like that. Everybody will take damage. The damage cards are special in that sometimes they just reflect damage. Sometimes they do things like, hey, you also got a concussion or something, and that's going to limit your movement or things like that. So you do your little skirmishes. You use your sticks. There's a range finding stick to determine whether or not things are in range for bows and arrows and breath weapon attacks and melee attacks, of course. The dragon can use its claws, but it can only do that if it's, touching a miniature. Otherwise, you're too far away. I've never seen somebody fist fight somebody else across the room outside of, weird Eastern martial arts movies. So, another cool thing about this game is WizKids also makes the miniatures for the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game that you can use during that game. And these are basically the same miniatures. As you can see, these elves have just a regular black base, and then they are snapped into the holder for this game. Those miniatures are actually the exact same miniatures that you can use in the Dungeons & Dragons game. So a lot of these miniatures, you can serve a dual purpose. If you want a special-looking elf, you can go ahead and swap out one of these elves with some other elf mini that you have from the Dungeons & Dragons game. Whether or not that's legal in tournaments is going to depend on the tournament organizer. I've never met anybody who was opposed to the idea just in regular play, though. Just you and your friends. I mean, your friend's not going to go, oh, no, that's the wrong elf mini. These are the exact same miniatures. Obviously, the flying ones, like the dragon here, they had to change out the base. The actual Dungeons & Dragons miniatures all come with these black bases like the elves. And a lot of the flying ones, they thought it looked cooler putting them on a stick and getting them elevated off the ground rather than just having them sit on the black base on the table, or on the game base on the table. So, Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing. I love this game. It's a lot of fun. I hope a lot of other people get into it because I would love to carry this in the store. It is kind of a pricey game to get into. If you get the starter kit, it comes with 3 dragons, all of the movement sticks, rangefinder sticks, damage cards, stuff like that you're going to want. It's got a couple of adventures in there to get started. And then all the other miniatures, as I said before, have to be purchased separately. They range from $10 to $30, possibly more expensive for the bigger minis. I don't know if WizKids is still doing it because it's been a long time since I've been involved in an actual tournament for this, but I do know when they first came out with this, WizKids tournaments had special miniatures you could win in the tournament. That's the only place you could get them, was in tournaments. Obviously, you can probably get them on eBay now. Tournament winners have probably, put some of them up for auction at some point in time. But otherwise, the tournament was the only place to get them. And they were some really cool-looking miniatures. Anybody who's into Dungeons & Dragons would know Bahamut and Tiamat, the 2 dragon gods. You could win them in the very first season tournament thing that WizKids did. I didn't get a chance to play in that. We just didn't have enough people in the area who liked this particular version. A lot of people who love X-Wing, but not Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing. And it is kind of difficult to get into both. Like I said, it's kind of expensive. But I hope we find some people who love this game as much as I do. I would love to play this game some more, get some new miniatures, and show it off. So that has been Dungeons & Dragons Attack Wing. Next week we will do... I still don't have this figured out. So, whatever it is, tune in. You'll see another great game. See you next week.